JMU men's basketball has a new head coach. It's Preston Spradlin, who comes to JMU from Morehead State, where he spent 8 seasons. One of those 8, he was an interim head coach, took over midway through the season, was a force of stability, I think, for the program. His first few years, kind of finding his footing as a head coach. He actually started, I think he got the head coaching job when he was 29. So he started to sort of find himself, and I think they gave him some leeway there to have some tougher seasons as he worked some things out and figure out his coaching identity. The last 4 years, Spradlin has really figured that out, and he was a guy who has spent a few years at Kentucky with Coach Calipari, John Calipari, University of Kentucky. So he's learned from one of the better programs of blue blood in college basketball. I think he's sort of taken bits and pieces from what he's learned over the years as a head coach, but then also an assistant at Kentucky, and use that at Morehead State to build one of the better mid majors. I guess you could even say low major for Morehead State in the country. 14 seed this year in the NCAA tournament. They lost to Illinois, but they had 26 wins on the year, which was a program record. It's their 4th consecutive 20-win season under Spradlin. So those last 4 years, they've really caught fire. It seems like he knows exactly what he wants out of his program. The things you'll see in that regard are really good defense. They're one of the best effective field goal percentage defenses in all of college basketball. They rank in the top 50 nationally in 2 of the last 4 seasons, right around the top 100 some other years there as well. Really, really sound defensively. They don't necessarily force a ton of turnovers, but they can block shots. They defend the 3 well. They defend the 2 well. Really sound defensively. He's been able to get players to buy in, whether it's transfers or recruits from high school, to buy into playing defense, which can be a challenge sometimes in this current era. So he's done a nice job finding players in the portal to come to Morehead State who are really under recruited, guys who are maybe playing at a different division, right? They weren't in Division One, or they were just a really unheralded Division One player that needed a spot where they could play to their strengths. And Spradlin's been able to do that at Morehead State. He's added players that were not highly recruited that were then able to form a really quality team, win 20 plus games, and then 2 times here in the last 4 years make an NCAA tournament, both times as 14 seeds. The Jukes, obviously JMU was a 12 seed this year. In a conference like the OVC, the last couple of years has been tough to get a whole lot better than that unless you've got NBA talent on your roster. So for Morehead State to get a 14 is a pretty solid season for them, pretty good deal. Last year, they beat Clemson in the first round of the NIT. This year, they lost to Indiana by a point. Had that one come down to the wire, certainly could have beat a Big Ten team. Played Illinois tough in the NCAA tournament this year, lost that game, but they actually led early in the second half. They're up 42-40 with about 17 minutes left in the game. So a team that's capable of competing against high major programs, one that certainly dominated conference competition. They were first in offensive and defensive efficiency this year in conference games in the OVC. So they were dominant in that league, really, really strong. Despite some injury troubles, they had their best player, the preseason player of the year, actually went down with a wrist injury before the season started for them. They were able to still rally and win 26 games despite him not being available, which is a pretty significant loss. They had another player then go on to win Conference Player of the Year. So the player that was out was Mark Freeman, who's now in the transfer portal, worth noting. Riley Minix this year is the guy who stepped up with Freeman out and had a great season. But overall, I think Jamie fans should be excited about this one from Spradlin. He's a really good hire, right? He's a guy who I think fits the mold of what Jeff Bourne is looking for, and has, to be honest, has maybe accomplished a little bit more in terms of making NCAA tournaments than Mark Byington did before he came to JMU. So to have 4 consecutive 20-win seasons at Morehead State, which is a program record for them, the program record for wins, 26 this season, speaks to what he was able to build at a program that doesn't have that many resources. It's in Kentucky, right, where you're obviously not the biggest show in town, but you're not even really the second or third. That's interesting to be able to win there. Where at JMU, you can compete with Virginia's and Virginia Tech. You don't have the same amount of money, you don't have the same NIL funding, but you certainly have enough resources to be competitive, as Mark Byington has shown with VCU and with Virginia Tech and with Virginia. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Spradlin does with more resources. You'd expect him to thrive. It's a good opportunity for him. He's a winner. He loves defense. They do play a slower offensive tempo, or at least they have the last couple of years. They've been in about the bottom 15 nationally in offensive tempo, which is a big change from the Mark Byington era, where the Dukes love to get out and transition. It seems like, at least at Morehead State, Spradlin liked his teams to play a little bit slower offensively, which likely meant that they were able to slow the game down, set their defense, which I think allowed them to play such quality defense here the last 4 seasons. So interesting to see what he does in terms of maybe playing a little bit faster at JMU if he wants to. Certainly a different caliber athlete you're able to recruit to the Sun Belt than the OVC. So maybe he's able to get some players that he feels more comfortable going fast with. But I've listened to some interviews with him. He's talked to people before the NCAA tournament, certainly this year. And one of the things he talked about is he wants to be good on defense. He wants to have a team that is capable, if a game moves a little bit faster, of keeping up. And he also talked about wanting to be able to hit 10 plus threes. He had a team early, I guess not early, but one of the first teams he took to the NCAA tournament. He described that team not being built for March compared to this year's roster, because this year's roster was able to hit 10 plus threes in games. They were more dynamic from the outside, whereas that previous team was maybe a little more old school and played inside out. They'd throw the ball in the post and try to score that way. So I think he understands how to adapt to modern college basketball, which is a really important trait to have. He might not be getting, right. I don't think he's going to start getting like 5 stars to come to JMU, but he's going to find players in the portal who are capable of playing well in his system. He's going to adjust his system in ways that play to his team's strengths, which I think is huge, where you've seen across different programs in the country, when they don't do that and they try to perfectly find players to fit a system, it can be a little bit disjointed, especially year to year with the portal if you have so much roster turnover every year. Whereas I think Spradlin does a much better job than most coaches in the country of allowing players to play to their strengths and tweaking his system for his players, for his personnel, which also gives JMU a lot of flexibility in the portal, right? You can add different players with different strengths and then play to those rather than needing certain players to do certain things every single season. So I think it creates a lot of flexibility for Spradlin, who will hear speak to the media at some point in the coming days. Should be interesting to see what he says about his team's tempo and sort of the importance of defense for him. But a good hire. I think if you're Jeff Bourne, you're happy with this hire. You have a guy who has NCAA tournament experience. He knows how to lead a mid-major program. I actually think it's kind of beneficial that he had a few tough seasons at Morehead State where they went through some stuff. And early in his coaching career, he was able to sort of find what works for him and what doesn't. Some lessons there. Probably learned a lot from that. I think he's really talented. Only 37 years old. I think the future for him is really bright. Probably a little premature, but certainly someone that if he can keep winning at the mid-major level, I think eventually could get a look at Kentucky. And I think that would be an interesting name to monitor here in the next decade or so to see his rise. There were some reports that Western Kentucky was interested in him, and he might have been interested in that opening as well. That's a big-time job. So I think Spradlin probably wasn't going to be at Morehead State much longer. For JMU to get him at this time, given his recent success, seems like a safe, smart hire with pretty strong upside. So I think it's a big hire for Jeff Bourne and company. They have a guy who understands the importance of the portal and recruiting, finding sort of those underrated gems that have been major in 2024 and beyond. He's somebody who knows how to build a team that's bought into playing defense, which is very important. You saw what App State did this year in the Sun Belt with an elite level defense. It's an exciting time to be a JMU fan. I think losing Mark Byington obviously hurts. Losing a lot of quality players in the portal hurts. But Preston Spradlin seems like he has the experience, the recent success to have a JMU team expecting to win 20-plus games and contend for a Sun Belt title every season. It's sort of the expectation now, and I think he'll be able to meet that.